High noon, Jones and Keefe here on WEEI. That was Don Sweeney talking yesterday about the Bruins and their approach at the trade deadline. He got into Brad Marchand and his future. We didn't pull this clip, but he also got into a back and forth about McAvoy. He didn't really get into it. He didn't want to get into it, which tells me it underscores how pissed the Bruins are. He's like, I'm not going to do any service by saying anything or explaining anything, and just I'm going to shut it down. We care about him as a Bruin. We care about the care that he gets here, and that's all I'm going to say about it. He shut that down pretty quick, which tells me they are so pissed about it, and rightfully so.
Yeah, so pissed. And obviously,
if a guy gets hurt, it's one thing.
Right. No, that's it.
If you have him play through it, maybe that's somewhat on the team and the pressure, but it also might just be on a guy wanting to go out there and play through it. You get him infected because you don't know how to shoot him up, that's on the medical staff.
100%. And obviously Don Sweeney's not mad at the tournament. I mean, he was the GM of the or the assistant GM or whatever it was of Team Canada. Like, so he's in on the tournament. These guys are all aboard that. Just the way this whole thing got bungled. He got hurt in the first game, then gets shot up, plays in the second game, and gets hurt more. And now who knows if he's even going to return this season. So, no, that specifically is what's really going to make teams mad. I'm sure there are some teams. There's no way it's unanimous across the board that probably think, hey, I don't love this. Like, we have a chance to win a cup this year. Like, if you're some of these really good teams, you're like, I'd rather us really prioritize that. I don't want this to get in the way, whether it's just the long layoff or maybe a player gets banged up or whatever else it is. They might not love it, but this case, more so than any of the other ones, does the team have a real beef with.
Yeah, so I agree. And, you know, I think a lot of teams, I think it's good for the sport. I said this last week. I think the Four Nations tournament was good for the sport, the notoriety of the sport. 10 million people in the U.S. watched that game or whatever it was.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Which the U.S. lost in overtime. Like, I think it was great for the sport of hockey. The individual teams, I'm sure they were all holding their breath.
Oh, my God. Florida and Ottawa and
Edmonton.
Vegas
like,
and
I would
Edmonton,
always go right to the top of it. It's like you have Connor McDavid. You have the best player in the sport, one of the greatest players in the history of the sport. And he's playing in a ultimately meaningless tournament.
I mean, McAvoy sent him through the glass in the first matchup.
You're holding your breath. So I don't know if any of the teams individually feel like the risk is worth it, but for the sport, I think it was a great tournament. But put the McAvoy stuff to the side, outside of, now this is the backdrop for the Bruins at the trade deadline. You said this last week, Keefe, when we started talking about it. They already should have been sellers. They already should have been leaning towards, quote-unquote, blowing it up. But maybe they were fighting it. McAvoy should be the final nail in the coffin where they're going to sell at the deadline next week. And Sweeney says they're going to take a quote-unquote cautious approach. I kind of thought that meant it's an indication that they're going to sell. It's going to be different than years past where it's buy, add, buy, add. You had a different read on it.
Yeah, I agree that it sounds like they're not going to add much, right? They're going to be cautious. They're not going to give up anything of real value. They don't want to be throwing away not throwing away, but they don't want to be giving up another first-round pick trying to chase a playoff run. But I also think the other side of it's true where like a major trade, and really the only one major trade would be Brad Marchand.
Right.
I don't think the other three, Pastrnak, McAvoy, or Swayman, are going anywhere. And no other player would I really consider a major trade.
Right. Frederick, Geeky, some of the names we talked, those aren't major aggressive moves.
Because if you trade Marchand, you're saying a lot, right? You're saying that we're in no chance making a run this year. Like, even though you're a point or two out, like, we're not making a run this year. There's probably also going to be other trades to be had. You're going to have to promote a new captain, like the shift inside the locker room. Like, there's a lot of things that are going to change. So by saying you're going to be cautious, it meant to me it's going to be very minor moves or no moves. Like minor on either side, like a slight buy or a slight sell or nothing. And that just sounds like the Red Sox. Don't you think Chaim Bloom for a couple of years and then Breslow last year? I would say that was a cautious trade deadline.
Yeah.
And it left everybody pissed. Everybody was pissed. The manager, the players, the fans, like, what are you? Like, what do you think we are?
Pick a lane, pick a direction. Don't just sit there in the middle on your hands.
So I think there'll be moves to be made. You know, every deadline, there's always moves to be made. Now, maybe sometimes it's the asking price might be a little bit steep or steeper some years than others, but they shouldn't come back, whatever it is, March 6th, 7th, the deadline, with the same group. And on top of it, McAvoy and Lindholm being out for who knows how long, that should make the decision just painfully obvious. Like, you should have been leaning that way anyway. Even if I was like, hey, Hampus is back tomorrow and McAvoy's back next week. Like, okay,
Yeah,
you should still sell.
Yeah.
So would I.
Yeah.
But if they're not back, and you look at the defensive pairings that they have to throw out there over the next few weeks, it seems like it's pretty obvious. But I don't know. And I always leave out the idea that GMs are always kind of lying at this point. Like, you want to put certain info out there that might be a little mistruth, or maybe you're at least trying to be like, hey, guys, we're pretty happy keeping Marchand, or like, hey, we're not going to do anything crazy. And it's like, all right, we need to sweeten the deal now for the Bruins in order for them to make a deal.
So I guess my read on it was, if you're going to be cautious, that's different than the last few years where you're traditionally looking to add. So already, to me, if you're doing something different than what you've done, I would characterize that as selling. I also think, what's he going to say? He's going to come out and say they're blowing the Bruins up? Like, of course he's not going to say that.
Here's our number.
We talk about it that way on the radio, but you're not going to come out and say, we're open for business. It's a fire sale. Everything that isn't nailed down, come get it. Like, that's just not the way it's going to work to the media. You might be telling other GMs that, but you're not going to come out in front of a microphone with the media and say that.
Right.
So I kind of came at it that way. But you raise a good point. If he's saying it's going to be a cautious deadline, does that sound like they're trading Marchand specifically?
No.
I mean, I would agree with you on that, which is disappointing.
Like, Frederick kind of is a little bit of everything. It's like, all right, we're changing up. We know that this mix isn't what's putting us over the top, but trading Frederick for a future piece doesn't make you like, oh, like the future's bright now, or like you already get another guy in the lineup. Like, okay, like that doesn't really do much. It seems like it all, to me, comes down to trade Marchand or keep him. And then if you go the other extreme, like add somebody, like, all right, who are you going to get? And then what are you giving up to get that player? Probably it's just more picks because your prospects stink because you never have the picks.
Correct. So you and I agree on this. You'd be more open to a trade, meaning an addition, trading to add something to the team than standing pat.
Because at least you have a direction.
At least you're trying to do something. I don't know how smart that would be. I wouldn't advise it, but I would prefer that over just standing there doing nothing and hoping something could change and you sneak into the playoffs and you get hot and you can go on a run. Like, that's not happening, I don't think.
No.
At least if you make an addition, there's a chance that you improve. Other teams don't improve. You get better. You're in the playoffs, and now maybe you win a round. You win a couple of rounds. Like, maybe.
Yeah.
I can at least see that. The thing they should do is sell. And the Sunday Skate show did their poll question yesterday.
Yep.
And they gave you 4 options. I don't know if you have it in front of you, Keefe, or not. Okay, I was going to say I could paraphrase, but if you have it in front of you,
they said the Bruins are 1 point out of a playoff spot with 24 games to go. What should they do at the deadline? And there were 4 options, the most allowed on Twitter or X.
Can't do a 5th?
Cannot.
Don't even think about a 6th.
Thanks a lot, Elon. So the first option was make a run.
Yep.
Second option, stand pat.
Okay.
Third option, minor retool for future.
All right.
Fourth option, blow it up.
Nice.
All right. From bottom to top, 3% said stand pat.
Okay.
My guess, user error, fat thumbs, that kind of thing.
That should still be 0, but okay,
0.
It's a low number. It's the lowest number on the board. Yep.
Make a run, 12%.
Okay.
Blow it up, 42%.
That's a lot. 42% of the fan base is saying blow the thing up.
Yep. To smithereens. Yep. And then the minor retool for the future is 43%. So that won the poll, but it was obviously very close. So pretty neck and neck.
And again, to put it another way, 85% of the poll, and these are hardcore Bruins fans, the Sunday Skate.
Yeah.
So these are hardcore Bruins fans who follow it closely or are invested in it. 85% say sell. I mean, to put that another way, 85% of you are selling.
This ain't our year.
15% are saying add or stand pat.
So don't you also read it, and this is me sort of reading betwixt the lines, 42% say go ahead and trade Marchand. 43% are like trade other guys but keep him.
Yeah.
That's also how I kind of
That's
read
a fair
that.
way to put it. And so even among that group, it's like 50-50, do you trade Marchand or do you not? So I think that's pretty telling. I think a lot of the fans have, I say turned on the organization, just kind of, they don't want to keep going with this group. Mm-hmm. They don't see a way forward with this group. So you might as well rip up the Band-Aid and do something now, which I agree with. We can debate whether or not Sweeney actually told us that yesterday or if Neely even told us that a few weeks ago and what the right way to go about it is. But I think most of the fan base is there. You and I have been there for a while.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't the year. You've tried for a long time. It hasn't changed. It's kind of been this way all year long. It hasn't looked right. You fired the coach. You got a quick little response and then nothing out of the team. Most players on the team have underachieved this year, including the goalie who you paid this offseason. Now a big-ticket guy like Charlie McAvoy is hurt. It's not your year. Sell. That should be simple, and we can debate how much you're going to sell, how big you're going to go. but that's where most of the fan base is at, and I think they're right. And I think the Bruins know it.
I think it's kind of like being a Red Sox fan the last few years. It really is. And not just the trade deadline comparisons, but the number of players you like on the team versus the ones that you really don't. Like, what can you do? And, stop trying to, just middle it and, get good as soon as possible.
Yeah. I mean, the Bruins have more star power than the Red Sox have the last couple of years. Yeah. Maybe this is a poor analogy, but there are still a lot of who the hell are these guys vibes on the Bruins.
They do have a bunch of those guys.
Which there was a lot of that with the Red Sox the last few years. Like, you turn on the game and you go, where'd they get this guy? Who is this guy?
Who's this gentleman now pitching?
Yeah. There's some of that with the Bruins. Again, they have more star power than the Sox have had.
Kind of top-heavy, though.
But there's some of that with the Bruins now where you're like, wait a minute, who is this guy again?
No, there is. But there's also, they haven't bottomed out. Like, this isn't the Patriots. This isn't a 4-win, you're picking at the top of the draft team. The Red Sox, the last couple of years, I know they had their last place finishes, but last year wasn't one of them. And same with the Bruins. Like, they're not the worst team in the league by a long shot, but the problem is they might be closer to the worst team than the best team. Like, they're kind of right in the middle. So it's more important that you pick a lane, and that's also all right. That's why as a GM you get paid the big bucks, because when you're the first or second place team, it's obvious. When you're the last place team, it's obvious what you should be doing at the deadline. When you're in the middle, you can't just be like, I don't know. Because I really feel like, and I know he probably had a lot of restrictions on him, but what really did Chaim Bloom in were these deadlines. He was a disaster at the deadlines. And now with Don Sweeney, what is he going to do? When he was a buyer, I feel like he's done a pretty good job.
Agreed.
I think he's known when to give up first-round picks. Now, some of them worked, some of it didn't. Rick Nash, you wish he would have been better, but it was the right call at the time. Bertuzzi a couple of years ago, and Orloff and Hathaway, those were good moves. Those guys all helped the team. But now, you got to do something. The writing's on the wall for this team, and hopefully he's just saying it's going to be a real cautious approach, and hopefully it's not.
So Don Sweeney used the word cautious, as you just said, a cautious approach at the trade deadline. What does that mean? And is he right to approach the deadline cautiously, or does he need to be more aggressive? Again, you can jump in, 617-779-7937. Keefe, you just brought up the name Chaim Bloom. It gets to the same area and the same issue that the Bruins are facing now. Don Sweeney, his strength is adding at the deadline. His strength is trading a draft pick because he sucks at drafting.
Trades all the draft picks.
For a roster player. And they have, it seems a good... they're good with NHL personnel, not so much with, scouting junior hockey and college hockey, but they have a good evaluation at the NHL level for the trades they've made. Well, now Sweeney's got to do the opposite thing. Now he's got to retool it and tear it down to a degree, or at least sell minorly and try to seek out prospects on other teams and pluck guys from this team here and identify which team he's going to get a better draft pick out of. And I don't know that that's his strength. So, all right, fine. Let's say the Bruins realize they got to sell. Let's say they realize that they have to retool things, to use Cam Neely's words. Is Sweeney the guy to do that? And if it's not Sweeney, who's in charge? Who do you feel good about doing that for the Bruins?
He's in charge right now, and then you got Cam you would think kind of in lockstep with him, but also has more job security than Sweeney does. They bring in Chara for a role that I think we're still trying to figure out a little bit.
Do you feel like that's looming over any of this in any way?
I mean, I feel like Chara's 6'9", he's probably looming over everybody just at all times. He feels like a guy who would be looming.
Yeah, he's looming.
Yeah, no, to me it was kind of odd timing that he kind of shows up. Is that what he wants to do? I don't even know what his thing is. Does he want to be a GM? Does he want to be a team president? Does he want to just be in the hockey?
Maybe longer term, but he's not pulling the strings on any moves at this deadline. No. I wouldn't think, or influence anything behind the scenes. I wouldn't imagine he is.
Speaking of the trade deadlines, the last 5 years, I was looking at their draft picks, and it's pretty amazing. So going back to 2020, meaning this is what they traded away, right? So what they didn't have that year.
Okay.
So they didn't have their first round or their fourth round. Then in 2021, they didn't have their second round pick.
Okay.
In 2022, they didn't have their first or their third. In 23, they didn't have their first or their second or their fifth. And then last year, they didn't have their second or their third.
Nice.
So constantly trading at least two of their first four picks, in every draft.
For bad players, I think that second round pick was Andre Kasha. He played 10 games.
Okay, but
no, but you're right.
That was in the Lindholm trade, wasn't it? That was the Hamper and Kasha, wasn't it? All in the same trade? I thought
maybe.
Maybe I'm wrong about that. Or did they trade? Oh wait, or did they? I don't quite remember. I thought Kasha might have been in that trade. Regardless,
I'll tell you exactly where the Kasha was
but
traded.
my point, I agreed with that approach for years. You were in it. You were like trying to contend, and maybe you weren't every year setting the wins record like they were a couple of years ago.
Kasha was for a first-round pick, Axel Anderson and David Backus.
I thought he was in the Lindholm trade.
Backus salary.
Backus salary dump.
Backus salary dump.
Yeah.
There you go.
So that kind of muddies it a little bit. But the point is, it is the norm for them to trade multiple picks, but all those years they were also in it. They were playoff teams.
I agreed with that. I thought that was the right approach most of those years. It's like, good, supplement your team, go try to win. You might not win, but go try for it.
But is that what he falls back on? Because he's so used to doing that, and he's like, hey, we are only,
but it's just
a point back from the playoff spot?
Well, and there would be
out of hand.
There would be a way to look at that and say ownership wants to make the playoffs, get home playoff games. It's what Sweeney's best at. Like, you could talk yourself into doing that, I guess. I don't know if the Bruins have the right people to tear this down. And they certainly don't have a lot of attractive trade items unless you're going to move Brad Marchand, which I think is a no-brainer, but I think the team is more conflicted on, it seems. Unless you're going to think really big about Pastrnak and McAvoy and Swayman, which I would consider moving any of those guys in the offseason. I don't know that the deadline is the right time to maximize that asset, personally. And I don't think you have to trade any of those guys, but I would listen on all of them in the offseason. I would really gauge it league-wide, open it up to not just contenders, but everybody, and say, hey, he's available. Let's see what we could really get for this piece, whether it's Pastrnak or Swayman or McAvoy. I would look at it. But, right, is Sweeney the right guy to do that? And if he's handcuffed in any way at the trade deadline, who's actually calling the shots? Is it Neely? Is Chara somehow, again, looming over the whole thing? Like, I don't know, and I don't know if there's a good answer for this. So does that inform the Bruins in any way, where they're like, well, we want to retool, but he sucks at it, so we might as well just add because maybe we get some home playoff games? That's a horrible way to go about this deadline when you should be selling.
Do you think Sweeney and Neely's mind is already made up privately, or are they really looking to see where they're at after these next 6 games?
I think between Neely's comments a few weeks ago, the retool comment, and this one from Sweeney, I think they can't quite come out and say we're blowing the thing up or we're selling, but I think they're trying to soften the blow for when it actually happens. If you're asking me what I think, that's what I think.
So what I would love to know is if they're getting calls about Marchand, are they saying no, or are they saying no, not right now? Like, are they saying, like, give me a couple of days, let's see where this goes? Because I wonder, like, 6 games.
I think they're saying, come talk to me closer to the deadline, because they're trying to play teams off each other.
But
I hope they're not saying no.
But I also wonder if they have like a deal lined up, and let's say they win 4 out of these next 5 games, and Ottawa continues to lose, and some of these teams around them, and they're not that I think they're going to go on a run, but let's say they're one of the wild card teams at the time of the deadline, and then they flip Marchand. Like, I don't know if they would do that. I feel like they would then have this false sense of like, all right, here we are. Let's ride this out.
You're right. The parallels to the Red Sox were strong.
Yeah,
where it's like if you're in wild card position and selling, it's a bad look.
The Mariners did that. Was it last year or the year before? They were in playoff contention. They traded away their closer and somebody else, and then they still went on a run.
It's a good point. And that did work out for the Mariners.
That oddly worked out for them.
But it's a good point. It's like there's a benefit to making a trade right now and not waiting.
Right, because then it might screw
week.
up what you actually want to do.
You might be in the first wild card position when you actually want to try. That's a good point.
Or there's the flip side of it is like you're looking to add. You lose you've already lost 3 in a row. You lose a couple more games. Like, hey, now you're 4 points out. And now you're adding. Like, what are you doing?
It's a complex deadline for a GM that is on the hot seat.
But he went to Harvard, so not a better guy for the job, not a smarter guy for the job.
Not a smarter guy for the job. But it's a complex deadline for a guy who hasn't excelled at retooling and selling off pieces and burning it down.